Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of the OJ Podcast. I'm Daniel Bagaport, and today we're interviewing my friend, Boulos Haddad. Welcome to the show, Boulos.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Dude, it's super cool to get to interview you. You're like the third musketeer of the famous or soon to be famous company, Dragonskin.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's kind of wild to put it in that perspective, but yeah, it's been the three of us and it's been a journey. And to your point, hopefully one day we're famous. But yeah, the third musketeer of Dragonskin for sure.
Yeah. Did you ever watch The Three Musketeers? I know you said you're not super big on pop culture.
No, so that is my ultimate
Okay.
feeling is yeah, I am not big on pop culture and I don't think I've ever watched The Three Musketeers, but funnily, like that is something like growing up I would often be called like my mom, for example, would call my brother, herself, and myself like the Three Musketeers. So it's a term that's actually followed me for whatever reason, and it was interesting that you just brought it up. Interestingly,
Dude, that's funny. Yeah. 'Cause we grew up on them. They're classic, you know. They're
for sure.
heroes and to fight the evil empire, kind of like Star Wars style, you know. And what's interesting
Yeah.
to me is how different each of them is too. Would you say you and Randy and Michael are pretty different?
It's wild. So I think it's weird because, kind of, I guess to share background, you know this, but just to share with, I guess more background is we met in college, and I'd say we're different than the norm. Like we each have our quirks and differences from like the norm. But then when you kind of look at us as a group, within the group, we probably share more similarities between us three than you might like find like us compared to someone from the norm. And I
Hmm.
think it's kind of almost like a birds of a fellow kind of perspective on it. So it's like we I don't know, like the way that we approach problems kind of quantitatively is kind of similar, like the way we kind of analyze things is similar. But then we're also super different. Like, Randy, I consider to be like almost like a robot operator in a positive way. Michael is like, throw caution to the wind in a positive way. And then I have like I don't know, sometimes like a floating aspect sometimes. I don't know how to describe it in some ways. Like I feel like we're not bound to like traditional constraints when we're trying to do problem solving and try to think outside of the box. So
Huh.
try to float beyond kind of our traditional thing. So we're different and yet more similar than I guess you would if you took like a random group of the population and started comparing people.
Yeah. So do you think that it's almost like natural that you guys would have bound up and formed a team then because you have that sort of similar like methodical approach?
Um, I don't think it's quite like I don't know. I guess I wouldn't call it quite natural, just because, for example, and they would tell you the same, is like especially in college, I was really shy, and I'm
Hmm.
still shy,
Yeah.
to an extent, but um, like Randy and Michael are definitely they were like really um like they were extending reaching out and like wanting to become friends and stuff like that. Um and I think, it kind of I think we became friends against some of the odds actually. It's not quite like it was a natural like thing that just worked out. I think yeah, we can't kind of became friends against the odds and I'm super grateful for it since, but I don't know. Like I guess from that perspective it's not quite natural that we got to be like friends and work with each other and stuff like that. But when we started to, it feels really natural. Like every time I get to meet with them, every time I get to work with them, I feel like so incredibly grateful. Like I just realized like I'm humbled by like the fact that I get to work with them on something like Dragon Skin. And yeah, I reminded myself of that literally every meeting we have with each other. And I try to vocalize it to them as much as possible. And sometimes I think I'm just like, just saying nice things because, but it's true. Like, I'm really, really grateful to work with them.
So
And since
cool.
then, I feel like it's been like a natural kind of like opportunity to work with each other for like years now, years working
Yeah.
on Dragon. So,
It's so sweet, man. It reminds me of I tell my friends too, like one of the things I love about this podcast is it's just a great excuse to get to interview my friends.
no, I think that's so, I think that's the I don't know, like you get to learn so much about the people that you like, or in your sphere in like ways that you don't even get to know. And I think that's awesome. Like I just watching your podcast with like even Michael and Randy, like I learned more about them than I already knew. And like it's cool. You get to learn more about the person than you knew. And
Yeah.
it's a cool kind of format to do it, which is just like having a podcast, having a chat, which is awesome.
Yeah. So, well, speaking of getting to know people, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah. So I guess maybe I'll start before there was a myself. And, I guess it just to say like to give context on kind of I don't know how I came to be, I guess. So so like my parents both immigrated to the US from like abroad. So they met in the Middle East. That's kind of my heritage. And my mom has like Egyptian and Palestinian kind of heritage, and
No
my
way.
dad's and my dad's Jordanian. So they met each other in Jordan, and then they came here to California, in Southern California, specifically San Bernardino and Loma Linda is kind of where I grew up, and that's where I grew up. Like all my childhood is like in that San Bernardino Loma Linda area, and I wouldn't say it was in a bubble, but they're like smaller towns relative like to these big cities.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, like for example, growing up I thought that the Trader Joe's in our city was like the only Trader Joe's. Like I didn't have this concept of like
Yeah. Oh, that's such a nice mom and pop shop. Trader Joe's.
yeah,
I've never met
but like
Trader Joe, but I'm sure he's a nice guy.
but like I didn't have like this notion of like chain like the chains per se. Like there was like I think a Lakeshore Learning, and I thought that was like the only one in all the world. And I was so like I would I don't know, like I would just I kind of grew up in a what I'd call like a smaller town.
Hmm.
And yeah, I was there until I headed to college. And in college I because I was I grew up in one place, I'm like I don't necessarily want to go too far. So I was just looking at schools in California for the most part, and I ended up going to UCSD, and then did college there. Some random, I guess, like I studied like I switched majors a few times, but I ended up doing like physiology and neuroscience as kind of like one thing, and then basically an independent major like that you get to create basically in business. But there was like politics around me calling it business, so they made me call it something super esoteric. But I did that,
Who
and
made you
then
who made you call it something esoteric? The university?
I don't know. So like, so basically, the way it works is like you
Hmm.
create like your own major. You basically say like these are the classes that I want to be in this individual studies major,
Yeah.
and then you have to have like I guess some sort of department like sponsor it. So I took it to the business school
Hmm.
in UCSD, and I'm like, hey, I want to call this individual studies in business because this is like a business major. All the classes in it are business. They're like, nah, like we don't really. There's no such thing as like a business major for undergrads. Basically, I think they were afraid that it would devalue an MBA, which is master's in
Uh,
business administration. So they wouldn't let me call it a bachelor's in independent studies in business. So they made me call it something. They made me, and I said, okay, fine. Can I call it like entrepreneurship? They're like, no. So they made me
shoot,
call it
man.
like, yeah, they made me call it individual studies in entrepreneurship and biotechnology, which is like really, really specific and unfortunate because like say it was like made out of like I don't know 15 classes, and there was like one class in there about like entrepreneurship and biotechnology. But I guess that was the compromise I had to make
Oh,
to get that individual studies major, and it was fine. At the end of the day, the classes were the same. Just the naming was a little bit weird.
that's funny.
um, yeah, and I did like a minor in like political science and another one in the humanities. I
No
don't know.
way,
I had
dude. How
like
much did you study? That's like the last thing you did was like all I did in college, political science. You did like five other things that sounded super complicated.
I don't know. I did like a whole bunch of random stuff because I was interested in a whole bunch of random stuff. And in
Mm,
fact, yeah, it was kind of weird because like in retrospect, I don't know if I should have gone down that path versus like because classes are awesome.
yeah.
But then there's also like the experiences part of things.
Right.
And I feel like by doing the classes focus, I didn't so much get to focus on like the experiences as much that
Mm,
are kind of unique to growing up in like a college environment, or like, doing things in a college environment. So that was college. And then basically, yeah, after that, I did bits and pieces. Tried startups, tried independent, like real estate, accounting, and then finally Google, and then now I'm post Google, in doing dragon skin, like we were discussing earlier. But that's kind of me and my twists and turns to where I am now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. What an adventure, man. Like, it's rare for me to meet people who have as many skills and a varied background as you. It's pretty cool to hear. And then, yeah, it's an honor. Like, I never realized how smart the people I get to interview are until sometimes I interview them and I'm like, dang, Boulos. Wow, that's crazy.
Oh
So,
my goodness. No, thank you for the kind words. No, I'm grateful for my path. I don't know if it's per se smart. It just like it's sometimes it feels like throwing darts at a dartboard.
yeah,
Yeah, it's but yeah, it's been like a wild path. And I'm glad that I got to, like, have like these different experiences. And yeah, it's been cool. And the people I get to meet along the way and stuff like that. So it's been awesome.
wow. Well, one other fact, just kind of a random fact we sort of stumbled upon while we were chatting before this podcast, I wanted to share with the viewers is the meaning of your first and last name. Because, and first off, to specify, so his last name is a very common name throughout Lebanon and other countries in the Middle East, right?
Yeah, so I didn't know this until I was at Google, interestingly, and like I was talking to a coworker, and I was like sharing my name, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm super familiar with your last name. Like it's a super popular name." And again, growing up, I thought I was like the only, like I was part of the only Haddads in the world. Um, but yeah, it turns out that like Haddad is like a super popular last name. My first name, believe it or not, is like a popular usually last name, at least in Egypt. But yeah, I guess Boulos is like the name Paul, like from the Bible. So, but in Arabic.
Yeah.
So that's Boulos, and I think it might even be in Greek.
Yeah, it's
Is something
Polos,
similar.
Polos or something like that in Greek.
Something similar,
So your
yeah.
name
And
is
then
actually more close to how his name probably was.
yeah, I think so. I mean,
Boulos.
and that probably makes more sense. I think it's the further you get from the origin of things, the more they've
Yeah.
get changed. And then my last name means like blacksmith or smith. So I guess my name in like English means like Paul Smith, which to me is just so I don't know. I just find it so funny because like Boulos Haddad is like a super, to at least in America, is a super unique name, but Paul Smith probably is not. So
Dude, it's
it
so
just
cool.
is really funny to
Actually, I
me.
have a
And yeah,
friend. I have a friend named Paul Smith.
no,
For real. Yeah, he's a pilot. I have to interview him one of these days
oh,
too. That's
that
crazy.
is so that is really cool. And then yeah, and then something else about my name is like it's kind of like traditional to get named after your grandpa in the Middle East. So my name is my exact grandpa's name.
Okay.
Yeah, and my brother's name is my other grandpa's name. So I'm from my dad's side grandpa's name, and my brother is his my mom's side's dad's.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to kind of have that as like, your name also representing something in terms of like familial relationship
Yeah.
too. So
You kind of carry on
yeah.
your grandfather's name. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's cool because like I've also noticed that some of my friends are Mongolian and
Mm.
they will take on like the mother's father's name as part of their last name and then also their father's last name. So it's like a combination, kind of like the Latino culture where it's like, Vera Cruz Valdez, they get like a double last name.
Oh,
So,
cool.
but it's kind of cool because like, yeah, you don't want to forget your ancestors, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, like even just the fact that we like inherit kind of like last names, that whole concept to me is wild. Like there's so much to, I don't know, naming that's interesting. I don't know the nuances. And I'm learning some new ones now
Yeah,
from you about like, for example, how it's done in Mongolian culture. But I just think it's really cool
yeah,
how like that's kind of like, like you could trace your family through that. I
yeah.
think that's
Well, and the thing is, there's some value to it. Like, at least I know there's a lot of oral countries that have oral traditions, like the Navajo, nation, the Dene people. I was talking to some of them, and they said one of the common things they do when they introduce themselves at like a powwow or like a get together is they'll introduce themselves and all their ancestors they came from. And
wow.
one of the reasons is simply enough, yeah, well, they'll ask what clan you're from, and that's usually an indicator that they like you because they want to
Oh
know
wow.
that they're not crossing, the same genetic material. So they'll ask
Oh,
you, what clan are you from? It's kind of like, okay, hey, are you? We're not cousins, are we? You know, but the value in, yeah, knowing your name, knowing where you came from, and just also establishing who you are, right? They'll be, oh, that's that person that, you're a descendant of George Washington, like how cool is it? I've met some people who are related to George Washington. It's like, wow, how cool is that? You know?
that is cool. That is so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
like the more you learn about kind of what brought you here, I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me, like just to think about how much it's like traditions get passed from generation to generation. Like how much of it makes you who you are is is based on like, you know, thousands of years of like basically things getting passed down, like
Yeah.
people learning things, you know, and ultimately you're kind of like me, you are kind of steerers of our own boats. But it's interesting to think that like how much of the boat has been kind of made when
Yeah.
you land on both, and then how much you will influence what's behind, like moving forward from like the people you interact with, even if it's not your own family, but like your family or the people you interact with. So yeah, to me it's just like wild, wild stuff.
Yeah, man. Do you want to know a fun fact about your last name as well? You might already know, but
I don't know, we'll see, we'll find
okay.
out, but I do want to know.
So
So
I guessed Smith when we were like discussing before the podcast. Do you know
yeah.
why I guessed Smith?
No, I thought you knew.
No, no. Well, I had a guess, but I didn't know in Arabic because I don't
Oh
speak Arabic. But
yeah.
Smith is one of the most common names in the world, uh, in any language. And the reason I came into that was because I thought at one point if I was going to become a police officer, that I would change my last name to Smith, because
Oh
it
yeah.
helps you protect yourself from things like Antifa or like people who might try to hurt you. You know,
Oh, I see.
it's one of the concepts. It's just like a school of fish where everyone's supposed to like blend in. The same is
uh
true with like military or any kind of agency where there's some people who are out to get you that really don't like you. It's in your interest to disappear into the crowd, right?
uh
And the most common name in America, I believe, is James Smith.
oh,
So I'd
interesting.
considered if I were to ever change my name. Now the spoiler is released. Everyone knows my name would have been James Smith, but uh, the name Smith. So I was researching the origin, and because I was like, why is it so common? And there was an article about it that said when a kingdom came in and killed off like all the knights and everybody, right, and the kings, right, there was one group of people that they always wanted to keep, the Smiths,
Really?
because the Smiths were the ones who made the weapons.
Oh.
And so as a
Huh.
warlike kingdom, which up until recent history, everything's been pretty warlike, right? Um,
Yeah.
you could even say now there's still this tendency, but
Yeah.
we've sort of cultivated this idea of like, well, we don't do that. We handle things with business or economic warfare instead.
Right.
We try to like wash our hands of it as a society. But the Smiths, yeah, so were pervasive in every nation because they were the ones who didn't get annihilated. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I had no clue. I mean, I was wondering because like yeah, you always wonder, like I was wondering this the other day, which is like what makes a family like, you know, last. And I mean, it's not like some families will have more offspring and then there'll be more. I mean, that might be a factor, but to your point, I guess might have just been like just by nature of the value they bring to society, they keep on. So I'll be interested to see like how that changes in 100 years or 200. To your
Yeah.
point, like thankfully we don't have much war anymore, um,
Yeah.
and
At
but
least where
yeah,
we are. At least where
we
we
know
are.
that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there is still obviously war, but
Yeah.
I think hopefully there'll be a future that we can look forward to without it. So
Yeah. That'd be awesome, man.
yeah,
So that's your backstory. So okay, you went to college. You studied like five different things. We don't have time to go through all five of them, but let's pick one of them and say,
yeah.
yeah, why did you choose that? What career did you like fall in love with, and what's your passion? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess yeah. So going into college, I thought I was going to become like a neurosurgeon, which is like to say I was going to do 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of like medical school, and then I don't know, something like 7 years of residency, because I thought like the people who operate on the brain will be like they do something so profound to operate on the most complex organ of a human.
Yeah.
I thought that was going to be amazing. And then I'm like, I kind of got into college and I'm like, I don't know. I kind of want to do like something a lot more scaled because neurosurgeon does amazing things, but they they ultimately impact one person at a time in such a profound way. But I'm like, I don't know. I kind of want to do like a lot of positivity for a lot of people.
Hmm.
So I'm like, I don't know. I think that basically equates to entrepreneurship, which is doing, starting your own company with others, of course, and then creating as much as possible, like goodness for as many people as possible. So that's kind of what I fell in love with. And that's why I ended up doing like the major in entrepreneurship and biotechnology, if we want to be specific, I guess. But I just wanted to basically learn about like what does it take to create a business that helps as many people as possible. And I think transparently though, in college, that's probably the least like that's a class setting is probably the least setting that you learn about like starting a business. You learn a lot of good stuff, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but it's more on the like operational, how might you operate a business from like I don't know, like from I don't know, like the most, in my opinion, the most important thing that you could do to run a business is be really attuned to what customers need and deliver value. And that's not per se what you learn in college. Like you learn kind of like the operation of a business, which is needed.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but it's not the first step in starting a business. The first step in starting a business is like how you deliver a lot of positive value and fill in like a problem for people.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem space I fell in love with. And I don't know, it's taken on different like forms in my life, even in a more structured like role, like I might at Google or otherwise, like where I try to like do things intra the company to create positivity. But then obviously it's taken on an explicit like avenue as well with like something like a dragon skin where we're actively working to try to figure out a super niche but important problem, which is people are getting stung by stingrays and how might you solve for that. So yeah, I guess to your question, that's like the thing that was
Hmm.
drawing me to I don't know like my what I wanted to do.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful, man. Like to pursue entrepreneurship as a means of basically adding value to the world. 'Cause I remember one time I was listening, I overheard a couple kids in the library when I was in college. They were talking about weed, and they were like, "Oh yeah, man! Like if we just get in on this now, they're gonna start making dispensaries." This was like in the early 2000s. I mean, not
Oh,
early
wow.
2000s, but like
Yeah.
2010s,
Mm.
2011, 12. You know that time. So yeah, they were trying to like figure out how they could capitalize on the situation, not necessarily how they could help people. There's
Mm.
oh we can make tons of money, and while I think making money is important, I think making sure the way you make your money doesn't harm but actually helps the vast majority of people. I think that is critical as well, right?
Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah, and I agree. I think like money is important, and I do think like it equates to sometimes how much you can do in terms of impact. But I think yeah, being ethical about how you make your money is really really important.
Yeah.
In Dragon Skin, we have to confront that a lot. Like we have to confront
Mm.
um, like we have discussions about like how can we make this as transparent as possible, like the testing we have done with what kinds of stingrays we've done, the testing on like what exactly someone's risk might be like wearing this, and there's like so many ethical considerations that have to come into it, and ultimately our thing is like we want to be as transparent as possible, as much as possible. And for me, that actually borderlines on like how I view morality in general.
Mm.
Um, like because I think my definition of morality is something like if something you did, like whoever's impacted by an action you did was aware of it, so it's not secret. So like for example, if I stole something from a store that ultimately impacts the store's owners and maybe someone who was going to buy it but now it isn't available for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So the point is, if any action I did that impacted someone was known to all the people it impacted, would they be ultimately mad because they felt like they were like basically wronged? You
Yeah.
know, and it's not by any means a perfect definition of morality, but that's usually how I like use as a compass
Yeah.
to be like, okay, we're putting this figure out on like in terms of like percent Stingray resistance, percent coverage of Stingray with Stingray resistant materials. If people knew the very specifics on like how we came to that number, would they be okay with it? And the answer is yes. And in fact, the answer is we should probably even publish how we came up with that number on our
Yeah.
website so people really know what's going on. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think we operate as much as possible, like trying to be like ethically guided and like, yeah, as transparent as possible.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes that's you have to like, yeah, I guess to the earliest point we were making, money is important, but there's, in my opinion, morality is a lot more important.
Right.
So
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I'd like to take this into the realm of Google because you shared that you
yeah,
worked for how many years in Google?
yeah. So I joined Google in 2019. So interestingly, I will never forget the day that like I first got like I got an interview notice for Google, my first interview notice on my birthday on October 10th in 2018. So I
Wow,
was
what
like,
a cool birthday
wow,
present.
I know. It was like I think I had actually applied to Google something like 7 times, and that was like the seventh time, and I got notified on my birthday that like, hey, we want to talk to you for this position.
Wow.
So from October all the way till January 2019. So I joined January 2019, and then I stayed there. I just left about a couple months ago in April 23. So I stayed there. I call it my 50-month anniversary. It was like 4 years and 2 months.
That's
So
cool.
that's how long I was at Google.
Wow. And it is do because you're Arab, right, by descent.
Yeah.
Do Arabs put any stock in the number seven? I know in the Hebrew culture that's very important.
I don't know.
Really?
I'm so a couple things I'm not good at. One, we've established I'm not good at pop culture, and two, I'm not good at like so obviously I so appreciate like our cultural like richness, and I try to learn as much as possible, but I can't help but feel like I miss so much. Like there
Yeah.
are things that, like I'm in casual conversation with like one of my family members, and they tell me a saying or something like that, or like some significance of something. I'm like, what? I didn't know this. I'm like, I've been
What?
alive this long and I haven't learned this. So there very well might be some importance to the number seven,
Okay.
but
I
not
think
that
it's remarkable that it's on your seventh attempt that you get it, and it's on your birthday. I'm like,
yeah,
that's to me, it's like, wow, that's pretty special. That's kind of cool. You know?
yeah. No, all I know is I was super grateful, and it definitely made my birthday a lot more exciting. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was I kept applying because I really, really, really wanted to join Google. Like it wasn't I was applying to every company 7 times. It was Google that I was like applying to that much because
Mm,
I really wanted to join Google. And I think the reason why is um, I think like I was sharing, I've been drawn to like entrepreneurship, and part of entrepreneurship to me that's really, really cool. Like in fact, probably one of the most cool things is like innovation, like the fact that you're thinking outside of the status quo,
yeah.
that you're thinking about like solutions to problems that sometimes people live with for years without. Sometimes they know it's a problem and it's like a really big pain, and sometimes they don't even know it's a problem and they just like live with the problem. But the point is, I've always viewed Google as like a really innovative company, and that's
Yeah.
what I was drawn to.
Yeah.
And I was like really excited because I'm like, that's it. I want to join Google because they stand for the innovation that like I don't know, I see kind of that calls within me. Like I really I'm drawn to it and I see it at Google. So I think that's why I was just so attracted to it.
That's so cool. Yeah, man. It is an innovating company. I mean, I was listening to a little YouTube video on the way here, back home from work, and it was sharing about like all these creative projects that came out of Google, and they shared that one of the main reasons for it is they allocated at least at one point 20% of an employee's time to creative process. Is that correct? Was that the same for
Yeah.
you?
So it's literally called 20% time. And what it is basically after you get stabilized in your role, essentially,
Yeah.
you can ask your manager to basically work on 20% time. So it's so after so each role has its own metrics that you kind of have to meet. So after you
Mm.
finally get to those metrics, you can make a case to your manager and say like, hey, they usually post it like there are these projects that you need 20% time, or if you want you can create your own project, and then basically you can make a case like, hey, I want to work on this thing
Wow.
20% of the time.
Yeah.
And it really turns out to be like you're doing your role 100% of the time, and then the 20% is an extra
Extra.
20% of the
Okay.
time.
Okay.
But it still stands, which and that's something that I really appreciated at Google, which is that they have like a culture of one. I think you can like challenge, like if you see that there's a way to do something better,
Hmm.
you can basically commit to doing it if you know you get the right buy-in. But
Okay.
it's not like you can't speak to your director, or like there's like some qualm about like bringing up something if you disagree. Like if you have a viewpoint, if you have some data to back it up,
Yes.
and if you have a insight, then yeah, you could do it with a 20% project. And then there was even it's I mean this is all public. There's a group within Google called Area 120, which is like almost like a venture capital, where you're doing 20% time, 100% of your time, which is why it's called
Wow.
120,
Dude, that sounds
which is
so cool.
basically, yeah, you can make like a case to Area 120 on like a brand new idea you have that's relevant to Google's ecosystem, and then they can approve you for funding for something like 6 months, and
Nice.
then basically support you in that process. And then if it gets to be successful, continue supporting you so it integrates back into the business. But yeah, Google, in my opinion, has been really cool about giving people just a general space to do cool things, and then too like explicitly in these sorts of avenues like 20% projects and things like that.
Wow. I remember at one point there was like a movie that came out about people getting the job to work at Google. And
Yeah,
I think in the film, I'm sure, I mean, they probably made it a little larger than life, but there was like images of, I guess, like candy silos and like cereal silos and like video game stations and nap time. Like, is that a reality, or is that just like outsider perspective?
yeah. So first off, I should say, so Google is the first big company that I worked at. So a lot of it was like taking in newness. Um, and I was like shocked by what Google does have, and a lot of it is what you said. So I'll share,
No way.
if I go too long on the list, stop me. But first off, like they give you like in all the major offices like breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. Like
What?
it's not just like an option. It's like you get to like pick from multiple. Like each building has its own cafe, with like different options, sushi and like Indian
No
food,
way.
and
Dude.
like Mexican food, Filipino food. So that's like every single day. And then they basically have like food trucks that they bring in sometimes as well. They also have on almost every floor of a building what's called like a micro kitchen, multiple micro kitchens, which are like between breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you get hungry, there's probably like 10 types of like water, flavored water, and like snacks and hummus and
No
like
way.
so many things on tap. They have like baristas for coffee, or matchas or whatever, like almost like Starbucks.
Is all of
Almost,
this paid for?
yeah, it's all like included as
It's
part of your,
as you,
yeah, it's all free.
no
And
way.
yeah, and then they have massage chairs everywhere. They have even massage points
What?
that they give you to like, yeah, like they give you points to have like massages from a real person as well, in addition to the massage chairs.
No
They have
way.
like washers and dryers in the building.
So you could practically
Um,
just live there.
yeah, they literally have showers. They have
Wow.
nap pods, which people like. Obviously, you're not supposed to sleep there overnight, but people nap throughout, the day. They have like meditation rooms. Um,
No way.
Even a little thing, which when I first went there, I was kind of shocked, is like they if you need like notebooks or pens, pencils, you just grab them, which might be like a super traditional big company thing, but for me, I was like really shocked by it. They have like ATMs on campus. They have like these French bakeries in some places. They have, I don't know, it
Yeah.
keeps going on and on. Like they have
Dude.
between, at least in the Bay Area where I was, they have between their campuses, if you need to get like from campus A to campus B, you can call like their own internal Uber network. You can also like take shuttles if you're home and you need to like go from SF to San Jose. They have like these big Wi-Fi equipped shuttles to take you. So it keeps going on and
No
on
way,
and
dude.
on.
No
Uh,
way. I
oh yeah,
can't
and
believe
you
it.
did mention the game rooms. They have like in the buildings usually at least one game room, which is like they all vary, but it could be like a ping pong table, like physical games, like physical stuff, or it could be like in one of the buildings I was in, it was like a PS5, and
Okay, that's more my language
so
right there.
yeah. So I mean, it goes. I mean, on and on. Like, in fact, yeah. Like, one of the things that you can do at Google is you can show folks around. And I showed some folks, and they're like, "This is like a 5-star resort." I'm like, it really is. It's not like you can. I mean, you're doing the main thing at Google is you're working, right? But
Yeah.
and so you don't really have the space to always like go into the game room. Like I might go to the game room maybe once every 4 months, 5 months. But the point is that you're surrounded with all this stuff, and it becomes actually really easy to take it for granted because you
Yeah.
begin to think it's a quote unquote normal, when in
Right.
fact it's the opposite of normal. Like I had to constantly remind myself of like the amount of privilege that I had at Google. And like I said, I was there for 50 months. And,
Wow.
like I try to make it where in my 50th month versus my first month, I've had that same awe for the level of, everything that I got,
Yeah.
like all these blessings around me that I had. Um, so yeah, but it's super easy to lose that line of sight
Yeah.
to just like the wildness of the stuff around you.
Right. There's a saying in the Bible: the leech has two sisters. More and more they cry, something like that. Like there's just like always hungry for more. And then the eye of man is never satisfied, right? This idea that's
Yeah,
like you could have everything, and it still wouldn't be enough.
it's interesting. Yeah, and in a place like Google, I that like you have to think about. I mean, for me, that thought came up a lot, which is like the types of issues that people had at Google are very different than I imagine most of the world has in their workplaces. And I think it's almost like similar to like, for example, in America, we might have very different issues than they might have in a different place. Like we
Yeah.
have shelter, we have um, almost as like across the U.S. we have like universal basic income. It's not the same everywhere in the world. So our types of issues in the
Yeah.
U.S. Are going to be different. And similar in Google, when you have all these amenities, the types of issues that came up, um, like there's this phrase like first world problems. I think is a
Yeah.
common phrase.
Yeah.
I feel like in Google sometimes there was like first world workplace problems that people often expressed.
Wow.
It's not because they were any less like attuned or grateful. I think it was just as much, but I think what it is when you have such a high level of workplace, the type of problem you have um, is going to be very, very different. It's not fighting for it's not fighting for equitable pay. It's not fighting for
Hmm.
like stuff like that. It's fighting for a little bit more, I don't know, like unique things that are very specific to Google's kind of ecosystem that are at like the top of what a problem might be, but to other people might seem like nothing, because they're dealing with a lot more basic problems,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Like what would be? I mean, I can imagine a few of the problems that would come from that as well. In terms of like health wise, like I've just being in an office, like I've had a back injury before, partly caused by a sedentary lifestyle. I meet a lot of people who are like secretaries, lifelong secretaries, and they have carpal tunnel. And then a lot of people who have obesity, right? And it's like I think that's probably one of the biggest diseases, obesity and heart disease and diabetes in the United States. I think partly due to our first world status, right? Where
Yeah,
there's people starving in other countries, but we're dying because we actually have a little too much. Um,
right. Yeah, I guess I'll give like a contrast in my mind's eye. So
yeah,
you hear of workplaces where like things like stand too long, and like that's a challenge, or they're not getting equitable pay and they're asking for something like a $2 an hour raise, which is like just to live month to month. That's kind of like what I view as a traditional problem.
yeah,
At Google it's not quite like that. It's the thing is like at Google a problem might be that their raise from year to year is like 2%, versus which they say is less than the rate of inflation, which and don't like I think that, has like some problematic aspects, but at the end of the day, the folks at Google are getting paid way above average, like way far above average. And
Yeah.
so I guess what I'm trying to suggest is like the problems that come up at Google aren't that I'm not getting paid enough. It is
Yeah.
that I am not getting paid more than like as highly as I think I should be, and that's like a legit concern that was at Google. Is that folks were concerned about, for example, that their pay wasn't being increased enough relative to inflation,
Gotcha.
with inflation so high. It's not that they weren't making enough money; it's that it wasn't more like enough, more than enough, I guess. And to me, I understand it, like I said, but I also see the flip side of the token, which is like I'm immensely grateful to have had the opportunity to work at Google and to have had these benefits plus a really generous salary. Um, and I didn't quite see like the level of pain that folks were feeling with their amounts not raising that much relative to inflation. So that's like the nuance, I
Yeah.
guess.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much you're at liberty to speak of this, but I know there was that recent layoff in the tech sector across the board. But I know Google played a role in that too. You know, they had several, employees, a large group of employees that no longer work for Google. Did that? Would you say that was at all affected by like the people who? I mean, the people who usually they say they trim the fat, right? So the people that they cut are usually the ones that people are like, hey, that person doesn't really do enough, and they're always ungrateful. Did you see that kind of coming to play when there were these layoffs, or and not to put you in a hot
Yeah.
spot because I know there's some people who are going to be
Yeah.
like, oh man, I hate Boulos. He just said that I was lazy, but not to say that they were all that way, but was that kind
Yeah.
of the general thing? Is like, hey, if people weren't really able to keep up with Google's expectations, those were the ones that were let go. Was it kind of like that?
Yeah. So I'll talk in general terms, which is like,
Sure.
yeah, it was kind of interesting because companies like Google did well during COVID. There
Hmm.
was like
Yeah.
increased like advertising spend as people shifted to online spending and stuff like that, which is awesome. But then what happens is when you have like this temporary, like limited, it's a moment in time. COVID was a moment in time where Google experienced these benefits. On the other side of that, you end up having a lot more expenses that you built up during this time to
Hmm.
try to match what you thought was like forever revenue.
I see. Yeah.
But so yeah, unfortunately, Google had to let people go. And I mean, I'm just going to talk in general terms, which is anytime a company has to let people go,
Yeah.
it's going to be really challenging.
Yeah.
And in the US, it might be like a relatively like simple process to let people go, but across the world, it's not. Like you have to give months probably notice, especially in like I think the European countries. So as you can imagine, a lot of angst comes up with that. For example, if like the US precedes others in layoffs, and then the rest of the world doesn't know like where they are if they're being laid off.
Hmm.
But I think in general, I do think there may be some trimming the fat for like these companies in the process, but I also think that they probably revisit like in general. Not I'm not talking about Google in general. I'm
Yeah.
talking about probably like revisit what's their priority.
Yeah.
Like there might be things that companies invest in that they just see, absolutely no value in investing in.
Yeah.
So they might just let people go, although they were doing fantastic
Sure.
in that capacity, but it's like fantastic in something that they don't see
Profits.
as like, yeah. So
Yeah.
there's different extremes to this, and there's no right way to do it. Obviously, like companies like Twitter, we see on like the super extreme of trimming. I don't know what it is, something like 70% of their folks.
Wow, that's a lot.
Um, and then
Yeah.
you see companies like the public figure from Google, I think is like 10,000, which is I think a single digit percent. But yeah, there is no easy way to do this, and at the end of the day, it's not just. I mean, we kind of talked about money before, and in this situation too, we're talking about money.
Yeah.
It's not just money. You're not making money decisions. You're also making people decisions.
Right.
And yeah, anytime there's people involved, it's complicated. And then on the flip side, you end up with companies as well who haven't laid off people, and they sometimes start becoming an attractor of new talent because they haven't laid off people. So, for example, I think between the FANG companies, So Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and if we want to throw in the M, Microsoft. I think Apple may not have laid off people between the FANG companies. Um, so it's like that becomes like something that, you know, people start getting attuned to. Like they realize it. It's not like just lost on them. They do start realizing that
Yeah.
there are other companies out there that, you know, might not be as quick to lay off. So
Right. There's sort of this migration of the workforce,
yeah,
right, to whichever employer is going to be in their best interest, right?
yeah, it's interesting because at the end of the day, I genuinely believe this is like I feel like Google is like one of the pinnacle of like, you know, a corporate work experience.
Yeah.
Um, so when you're at a pinnacle, it becomes really tough, right? You know, from a personal professional like perspective, because the question becomes, is there going to be many companies better than the one I'm currently working for? And the answer is probably not, right?
Yeah.
There's very limited amounts of companies that might be better than the ones that you're working on. And then you start like, yeah, it becomes a very, very different mindset than if you're, you know, somewhere else. Um, Somewhere else. So yeah, so I don't know. It's like yeah, it's very unique, and I think it's something that I'll take with me forever. Yeah, it's like yeah, I just look my time at Google. I'm extremely grateful for just like from how much I learned in the process and like the people I got to meet along the
Yeah.
way, and just some of the things that you could have never imagined that you would learn while you were there, like what it feels like to be in a pinnacle work experience. You know, and pinnacle expectations too. Don't get me wrong. It's not
Yeah.
um, like when you're at Google, you're around many people who are like the best at usually what they do.
Yeah.
So it's very very heavy with imposter syndrome because
Sure.
like everybody is doing like really amazing things. But point is, yeah, it's like in that midst of that process, you learn so much. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of the most I'm yeah incredibly grateful for what I've learned during that time. So
Dude, that's so cool, man. So what's next for you? Where to next in the adventures of
yeah,
Boulos?
yeah. So I mean, ultimately, I talked about my time at Google, but the reason I decided to leave Google is I kind of felt like I I didn't want to climb a ladder. I kind of wanted to create something independent of you know a ladder, um, and you know I think that's where I decided basically gave myself a timeline. I either figure it out at Google or I leave Google, and unfortunately I hit that timeline for myself.
Yeah.
Um, and I say unfortunately, but it's also fortunately because that part of me is that I've always wanted to do something entrepreneurial and scaled, like impactful. So I started Dragon Skin with Michael and Randy while I was at Google,
Yeah.
and obviously I'm continuing to work that, and hopefully we're making positive progress, which is exciting stuff. But also in addition to Dragon Skin, I've been since I left Google exploring like different companies that I can start. And it's been interesting because the thing about starting companies is that you're going to fail a lot before you get to something that succeeds.
Yes.
It was like that with Dragon Skin, and it's hopefully going to be like that with my next company. But yeah, that's been my focus. Is I've been like exploring different companies to start, and yeah, starting from square zero with the second company. So we'll see. Things are, you know, I'd say stay tuned for what happens there. But that's at least where I'm focused right now is trying to figure out a second thing.
Yeah. That's how exciting though too. I was listening to as again preparing for this podcast the story of I believe his name was Sergey and I don't remember all the others involved in the founding of Google,
Google.
but they're kind of like in a way they're sort of like the pioneers of the internet because there was this problem that presented itself where all this information was being pumped out there and there was no real efficient way of identifying value added, right? Like which of these sources is going to be useful to the consumer, to the viewer. And so they came up with this idea of, hey, let's use citation. I'd heard that both of these inventors came from backgrounds that had been in education. Their parents were, you know, I think professors and had degrees. And so they were familiar with the concept of, hey, let's link from, you know, before there was a link, there was a citation. It's like, hey, this document references that document. So that document must be kind of important, right? And the more references that you get as a document, you're like bumping up on the ladder, of peer revision, right? And so it's kind of like the internet evolved in that same direction because of these two brilliant minds. And I think that it's incredibly fortunate for us who grew up using the internet, like people like me, consumers, that it was designed in such a way, because it could have been just like this, as it's sort of, I feel like, is devolved till now, where it's sort of the cesspool of like random stuff, cat photos and, bad things, and also just like time wasters, right? And it's like, well, how did that all get on the internet? But in the beginning, it was kind of that same problem, right? Where people were like, oh, I don't know how to parse through all this to find the nuggets of gold. And so who knows, maybe in their pursuit of trying to clean up a mess and innovate and create an opportunity, I heard this too. They tried to sell that to somebody. They're like, hey, this is a great idea. Let's find some investors. But nobody wanted to invest in it because I guess they were just, they were ahead of their time. And I guess as an inventor, as an innovator, you may have to fail a few times. You might not find people who want to invest in your idea right away. But the second guy, I think it was one of the professors actually who gave them some seed money, right? If the story.
I don't know the specifics.
Okay,
I
yeah.
know that they were at Stanford when they were like developing this, and I think they were like doing their PhD or something. And but yeah, like I think they, to your point, like they tried to sell it to Yahoo at the time, and it
Okay.
was like,
Yeah,
a super small amount, and Yahoo
yeah.
didn't.
Yeah,
Click on, and obviously now Google is one of the biggest companies in the world.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's like it's interesting because there's a timing aspect to things. To your point, there's like do people really understand the problem? Like sometimes when you're new to solving a problem, people don't really get it.
Yeah.
Like if you're trying to do something like Google was, they might not quite latch on when you're at the beginning of something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's like I see these like as like these massive changes in time, where things like enable us as individuals, as company creators, to like create these outsized companies and create outside, like solve for outsized problems.
Yeah.
And the internet, to your point, you and I grew up as kind of like in the nascency of the internet, and Google kind of rode that wave, Amazon rode that wave, eventually Facebook rode that wave. Now there's like new waves starting to get generated around like artificial intelligence and augmented reality,
Yeah.
and like it can be a whole set of like new other companies that can be formed in that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like the question will be like, can we make use of something like these waves and ride them, to create
Right.
outsized impact with as many people as possible.
Yeah.
uh, so yeah, that's the big question, and hopefully there's big answers that I can work towards in that context. I
Yeah.
don't know, so we'll see.
One of the big answers I think that I'm hearing people comment on, a potential answer, it could also be a potential
Yeah,
problem, is this idea of a mind chip, or some kind of a device that's implanted in the brain that connects us better to the internet, to
yeah,
information, to technology. And in a way, it's been articulated that we already are enhanced artificially, right, by nature of our cell phones and our computers,
yeah,
right? So we have this sort of an avatar presence online through things like Facebook or LinkedIn, and it enhances our ability to go out there and get the job, or get the girlfriend or the boyfriend, right? Or find the music that we really want to hear and not have to listen to all this garbage that we just get fed. So there is like an exciting potential in that. Do you think that your background in neuroscience and technology might pair well with that? Like, are you at all interested in that? Yeah.
So that's really interesting that you bring that up. So yeah, so there are companies out there like Neuralink, which are trying to create like the chips in the brains to communicate
Yeah.
with these other sources. I
Right.
do think that is interesting. I don't know, like I don't know. I am interested in biotechnology a lot, but that's not quite the areas that I'm most interested in. On the biotechnology side, I think it'll be I don't know. I think now there's like a lot of new opportunities around like basically healing humans, um,
Mm.
in the formation of like new medicines and therapeutics, and in a way that's much, much more precise than it ever was.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I think about it, which is like there are a lot of folks who don't get to live like healthy and fulfilled lives because there's some sort of sickness or whatever. And they're right now with the pharmaceutical companies, they spend millions and millions of dollars to try to come up with therapeutics. And still till now, like although it's gotten a lot better, it's like a little bit like shooting in the dark. So I think with
Mm.
things like artificial intelligence, I think that will get a lot more precise and a lot more personal, where individual people will have individual medicines,
Yeah.
whereas like medicines before have been almost like a catch-all with a lot of side effects. Call that 21st century medicines. I think early 21st century. I think that will change a lot with artificial intelligence, and I think yeah, like you might have a specific medicine for you, and I might have a specific medicine for me,
Right.
and so on and so forth. And yeah, I think it will change, yeah, just the quality of life for a lot of people around the world,
Right.
and bring down the cost of medicine, so that way it's not like which it is now, like some people's whole paychecks or
Right.
go into debt for like some sort of therapy. And I think that goes just to all of medicine. Like I think, for example, now like a doctor tries to see symptoms, and it's not really precise. But I think in the future it's going to be like really precise. Like with AI, they can like really quickly understand what is going on
Yeah.
instead of trying to guess what's going on and hypothesize. So I don't know. I get really excited. I think for all the technology we have in the world, I think humans and life in general is like, I continue to be amazed by how much more complex and like humans and life are in general. Like just to think like the strands of DNA, the cells inside of you, like cells are their own little cities with like the nucleus and the ribosomes, and I'm like, wow, like that's like absolutely amazing to think about.
Yeah.
Like I'm talking to you on a laptop, I have my phone, whatever, you name it, whatever technology I have, that all is like so minuscule and compared to like just amazingness of like us as a functioning,
Yeah.
system.
Because it's a living machine. It really is.
Yeah, it's a machine that lives, call it like 80 years, and like gets energy not from like electricity or whatever. We basically eat food, and like that powers us. We like have a cognition. We have such sophisticated like computation. Like I don't know, just absolutely amazing
Yeah.
to think about like how we are. I don't know, just like so amazing.
Yeah.
Like in terms of creation, just in terms of like I don't know this like really really sophisticated thing that exists. And I think
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes I take it for granted.
Right.
But yeah, the bacteria living in you and all these cells and the different organs and like the specialties, and oh my goodness, it's like mind boggling. It really is.
Yeah. No, it's amazing too. Like the cooling mechanism, right? We can just talk about like the lungs and the blood, right, and the skin.
Yeah.
It's tied into the resource delivery system, right? Because your blood
Mm.
is literally cooling you off, and it's feeding you,
Yeah.
and it's repairing
Yeah.
you, right? So it's
Yeah.
providing you energy, coolant, and structural support. Which
Yeah.
it's like how many machines do we know of that are capable of that? And it's in
Yeah.
one. It's kind of like one system, that's feeding all these other things. It's amazing. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, and like we heal ourselves, like if someone you get a cut or something, and it's like, oh my goodness, like like just the amount of I don't know, just the things that like happen, just are mind-boggling. Yeah, like we have all these senses. I don't know, life is just really really amazing stuff.
Yeah. One thing that always amazed me too is how I believe in entropy, and I do believe in the devolution of humankind, not the evolution of humankind,
Mhm.
because you kind of see it, in my opinion, if you take a big step back. But there's something miraculous, in my opinion, of the way a child is created and is started off. It begins life in a perfect, almost perfect state, right?
Yeah.
From an egg, a seed of a tree is the same way. The tree starts to die, right? It's being deteriorated. Its DNA is being destroyed, just like us, right? From the sun and everything, all radiation. And then it makes a seed, and that seed somehow starts off perfect, you know? And you see a little duckling. The duckling has no blemish, no flaw, you know? an old duckling, an old puppy, for example, has tumors. They start looking weird. Their teeth starts getting weird. Their breath stinks. Humans are the same. We slowly die. But it's almost like some kind of a reset that I was listening to one podcaster, Sarah. He believed in evolution. He said evolutionarily, it basically prevents, I guess, viruses from, having the upper hand on us, because then we're super easy to read if we don't change and if we don't start off a new iteration of ourselves. But I don't believe in that personally, but I think it's very interesting. But I do believe that there's something strange about humans and everything in this world, that why would it continue? Why would it start over and have that crazy head start, And I don't know
Yeah.
what's your opinion on that? Like, why do you think that is, and how do you think that works?
Yeah. I guess I'm not quite certain, but I do think like I don't know. I think it just for me it yeah, like the beginning of new life, like whether a baby, human or to your point, like a seed from a tree. Just amazing to think about. Like I was just thinking about this today, which is like just the amount of learning and change and stuff that happens to you in those like formative years.
Yeah,
Like people learn really complex ways of communicating what we call language, and they
yeah,
learn so much about the world around them. And obviously we continue to do that as we grow older, but it doesn't take as much energy, it doesn't take as much. So I think you need to have like that like formation period where like you kind of do the rough sketch of that person, so that way it's like less to operate that person over time. But at the beginning you need to have really intensive formative, like learning languages, how you operate, all this stuff. And I think that's so amazing. And you were touching a little bit about like evolution and things like that. I believe in like both creation and evolution, which
okay,
I
yeah,
know, might be a more nuance or not as popular. It's usually one or the other, but I believe it's like both. I believe
sure, yeah,
that, like God created the world and then people evolved over millions of years. And I think time is really relative. Like even the
hmm,
Bible says, like,
yeah,
I think 10,000 days for God might be like a day in human eyes. And I think, yeah, it's like, yeah, I think we've like created like, yeah, we've evolved over time. And like that evolution is like just points to the beauty of like all of it, the creation, the process. And yeah, it's been like, I
yeah,
don't know, it just, every time I think about the like just the I'm in awe of like what it is that to me to have this diversity of life, this
yeah,
amount of like diversity of life even in one person, like with all the cells inside of us and how it heals and like how your cells die and get
yeah,
made again. That to me just beyond even like it's just really really cool to like think about.
yeah. And I better specify too. I do believe in microevolution. So like, because it's obvious, like, you have a
Yeah.
wolf and you can break it into like 12 different kind of animals,
Yeah.
keep doing it.
Right.
So I do think that does, to your point, yeah, it does manifest itself in the diversity of our world. But yeah, it's super trippy to think that there's like machine programs that are, as we speak, trying to pinpoint, causes to health issues that humans face, and maybe these machines will come to some solutions, right?
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I look forward to
I
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll happen in our lifetime. And yeah, even like Google had like a public event recently where they were sharing that like, okay, traditionally, I think doctors like looked at eye scans for a condition like called diabetic retinopathy.
Hmm.
But now with like AI, they're starting to be able to detect a whole bunch of other things that might be wrong, with a human before like even a doctor might notice. So in our lifetimes, I think, yeah, we'll look back at this time and think that this whole health system was very much like cave person, like, really, because,
Yeah.
if you think about it, like now, if you're feeling like a headache, you don't know what's going on, or you might not know.
Right.
Like, I
People
think
just
you'll
say
be,
take an aspirin, right, or drink some water, or take a
yeah,
nap. It's like it's very
but I
backwards.
think so many, yeah, like that's an issue with symptoms. It's like with symptoms, you can make a guesstimate and work backwards. But I
It's
think in the
yeah,
future, it's like you will literally be able to like not in the future, like in our lifetimes, basically,
yeah,
you'll be able to take some blood and like very precisely like do
yeah,
genetic sequencing on everything in the blood, like get estimates of other like random proteins and stuff in the blood, and basically know very precisely what's your issue
yeah.
and very precisely be able to come up with like a solution.
It's so
And
cool.
yeah, I think people will look back at this time as like very much like how we look back at the 1800s on
Yeah,
how they might how they might have operated,
Yeah.
like whatever it is, like how
Yeah.
we might look back then. I think it's
Right.
like for example, like how people put leeches to draw blood, or they had like whatever.
Yeah.
I think people will look back at our time now and like on that for healthcare, because that's how much it will change.
Yeah. So people might look from the future, maybe even 50 years ahead of us, and say they were almost superstitious in their application of
Yeah,
medicine and
yeah,
pharmaceuticals. Right.
yeah. I think they'd say like we were very hand wavy, like we try to look at symptoms and figure it out. And the percent of success is probably, I don't know, like 60%, like 50%.
Yeah.
Um,
Those are not good
yeah,
odds. Like whenever someone tells me,
yeah,
well, this has like or it tells me it has side effects, right?
yeah.
Like,
Side effects.
I was like,
Yeah,
well, I don't want those side effects. I'd rather just take my chances with my own body.
yeah. It's kind of wild. Yeah, I think it's going to be very, very different.
Yeah.
And I, and I'm again, when I think about things I'm amazed about, I think like just about how our lifetimes are going to be experiencing so much change in such a pivot. Like in our lifetimes, you and I, there's like the popularity of the internet. There's like
Yeah.
like drones and phones and all this, like cellular phones, smartphones, and there's going to be augmented reality and AI. Like
Yeah.
all this, like if you took someone's lifespan from almost any generation before, when they were born to when they died, probably technology didn't change much. Probably, I mean, history might have changed. Like they might have had a new king, a new whatever.
Yeah.
But like the context of their living probably didn't change too much.
Yeah.
In our context of living when we were born
That's
versus
true.
hopefully further out when we'll die,
Yeah.
it's going to be very, very different. And even now, from generation to generation, like a millennial might be very different from Gen Z, although they're like
Oh,
touching
totally.
generations.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think it, yeah, I think that's something very, very unique to our lives. Yeah.
Right. You're right. Yeah. Because you think about it, all these ages in history, right? The progress was very linear and it was very slow, right?
Yeah.
You're like, okay, there was the Bronze Age, and they started figuring out that they could make iron after that, and they started the Iron Age, and their weapons, they were still chopping people's heads off with swords, but the swords didn't need to be sharpened as often, right? It's like no groundbreaking technological innovation. But then you get to like gunpowder, and then you get to the first computer, and then after that, it's like boom, there was just this like I remember before there was before there was not CDs, before there was streaming services, right? I remember floppy
Yeah.
disks. No one else.
Yeah.
I remember cassette tapes. I used them, right? No one else
Yeah.
today. 5 years after I was born, that was the cutoff. Nobody else today even knows what the heck that stuff was for,
Yeah.
right? And it's kind
Yeah.
of it's kind of funny because it's come back full circle. Now people are like, "Oh, that's vintage, man. That's so cool." But it's not
No,
cool.
no.
It's just crap. It's like, give me something that streams, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, and like I was just googling while you were talking about like how long the Iron Age was, and
Yeah,
I think it's like 1200 BC to 600 BC. That's 600 years,
that's
you
true. That's a
know,
long time to
and
figure out one different type of metal.
and our lifetimes in like call it 30 years, there's already been
Yeah.
massive amounts of change on how people live daily.
Hmm.
Like what you're doing now with video, like personal videoing, personal podcasting, would not
Yeah.
have been possible in like probably 40 years ago.
Even in
And like
2000, like
yeah,
they weren't doing that, you know?
yeah, and you're gonna put this to your point like on a streaming platform, YouTube, which never existed, and just like now we're really, really the amount. I think we're living in like a new information age where the accessibility of information has been achieved with like internet, and now with artificial intelligence, it is going to be hopefully the making sense of all the information, which is like
Yeah.
basically being able to come to realizations that would have traditionally taken a typical human or groups of humans much longer, like things that we have outstanding questions on, like how do you create energy cheaply, how do you create reliable health, for people, how do you create food in places that don't have it, like all these things that have taken historically humans very, very long to create. I think as we start working towards like AGI, which I think as we start working towards AGI, I think that's when you start getting into solving a lot of these like places that have historically been very, very long to solve for. So
Hmm.
I think our lifetimes are really, really unique in that way.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited. I'm excited, nervous, a whole bunch of stuff in one, but
Yeah.
it's humbling to think about.
Yeah. Well, for those of us who don't know, because I don't know myself, what does AGI stand for, Boulos?
Oh, sorry. It's artificial general intelligence. So
Okay.
right now we're like kind of we have like generative AI, which is like, for example, something like a GPT-4, which is really, really sophisticated in like answering questions for you.
Hmm.
But what it's basically doing is taking human knowledge as we have it in the internet and like giving you the answers that pre-exist. Like if I'm
Right.
asking a question on like what manufacturing consideration should I have for China, it will take the information in the internet and synthesize an answer
Yeah.
from the information that exists. AGI, the distinction, at least as I understand it, and I'm not by any means sophisticated, but the distinction as I understand it is that it will be able to get new information. So
Mm.
things that we've never been able to answer. So you could say like this is all of human physics data that we have. um, Give me maybe a new way to understand black holes, like that we have never been able to, general theory of like, give me like a way to potentially think about creating energy, limitless energy, and make nuclear fusion work, which we've never gotten to work in an energy positive way. Give me a medicine based on all this genetic data and like known molecules that I
Yeah.
can create to solve this issue. So it's like the next step, which we're not there at yet, is going to be not just synthesizing human information, but being able to create net new information that will solve for a lot of the unknown things that we don't know today.
Yeah. So we may get to a point where instead of just like saying, "Hey, this is the answer I'm looking for. Find it." We can
Yeah,
literally say, "Here's the problem. Can you help us find the solution, or can you help us find
yeah,
multiple solutions?"
yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that when you get there, and it's may still be a while, who knows, or it might come quick.
Yeah.
But when you get there, then there are major, major questions that we have to like. We'll be able to find an answer to. Hopefully, like for example, government today is run by people. People have self-interest. People, whatever. Um, when you have something like an AGI, you might be able to ask for an equitable,
Right.
like non-interest forming like legislation,
Sure.
like or you might be able to have like AGI do good decision making for on behalf of like the general populace, or like very specific groups of people to help support them. Like there's so many things that when you get to AGI,
Yeah.
which is going to be, like I said, it could be short term or far term, but it's like so much that you'll start to uncover. And I think hopefully it'll happen in our lifetimes, which is going to be wild, like really, really
Yeah, man, it's
wild.
gonna be trippy.
Yeah.
And of course,
Um,
there's a lot of. Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Did you have something else?
no,
Oh,
you didn't.
so and of course we're in an age where there's a lot of positives to this, but there's also some negatives, right? And I've heard like some of my friends who are Gen Zers, and like still in high school, they're struggling because we're now in a time where you can just ask the computer to write an essay for you in your English class, and your English literature teacher can't tell the difference, right? Because it's almost like a snowflake, right? It's like how is that teacher supposed to be able to see if this snowflake was a copy of that other snowflake when it looks so much like a different snowflake that the internet created, right? Because every one of these little artificial intelligence answers has a little different approach, right? A little nuance to
Yeah.
it. So how do we, as individuals, make sure we're not handicapping ourselves by leaning into these devices? And in a way, like it's almost inevitable because like I'm handicapped right now. Like if I were unable to use these computers, I'd be out of a job, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, these computers are destructive to my health. I have to take breaks for my eyes because I'll have times where my eyes just like don't work properly. I have to get up and do some exercise because this sedentary lifestyle kills. But it also pays for the bills, right? So in a way, we're sort of trapped. We're sort of slaves to the machine, even now, right? How do we make sure that doesn't increase or get to a point
Yeah.
where it's very difficult for us to escape?
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important question. It's one I've been thinking about because I think rightfully so, there's been like concerns, different concerns. You
Mm,
mentioned one, which is like, the learning process. There's so many others. But yeah, I think with any tool, there's always going to be positives and negatives, and it's going to be hard to mitigate both. So like with the internet, there's been so many positives. Like information is at your fingertips. Like you as a person have so much access to information, more than almost anybody in history, like 20 years before you. Like 20 years, 30 years before you have more knowledge at your fingertips than probably anyone in the world before that. Like a king of whatever, England, wouldn't have had as much information as you have. And like we can consume content, communicate across countries, which is like amazing, which would have taken years beforehand, and do interstate commerce. But then on the flip side, there's now bullying online. There's a lot of people who get like addicted to like social media and other forms of like, anything that basically creates like a positive feedback loop, but ultimately is negative for you. There's so many negative things. And same with artificial intelligence. I think what it is going to be like, there's going to be so many benefits. We described a whole bunch of them, but there's going to be so many negatives, which is now someone who is a bad actor is much more empowered to be a bad actor. If they want to like create code to like hack into systems, or if they want to create false information easily and at scale, if they want to, I don't know, there's so many things that they can be a bad actor. And then for generations growing up, now they have these tools that basically don't, they can kind of lean on them instead of their own creative process or whatever the case is. So I think my gripe is that I think basically school should empower you, in my opinion, to be a creative thinker, to empower you to like basically the tools for creation, whether it's engineering, whether it's art, whether it's music, whatever, creation in the world. And I think you should be, those skill sets should be developed. And then at the same time, you should be empowered with the tool sets of today. So my issue my issues with the education system is that sometimes they teach you like you're in a vacuum, like as if the real world doesn't exist, where you will have access to these tools. I think a solution might not be that a person can write the essay themselves, but something like, okay, like these are the sorts of things that you might get from AI. Like first, have that as an aside. First, what are you thinking about? We will look at what AI is thinking about. How might you make this like your own artistic thing, like your own, narrative that's really sophisticated? Like what might you do to, actually be contributing to the world versus consuming, which is a huge thing, right? Which is like the consumption of information, which is what AI will be spitting at you, what like media companies spit at you, versus a creation, which is something like you're doing here.
That's interesting, man. One more question about this, and then we can move on to the last couple topics, because I know we're already at an hour and a half, so I may have to trim this down a little bit. I tend to try to release the whole episode as a full episode though too. So that way people can see like just the real deal, but I may make a condensed version too. So here's the other question. I was driving home and I was thinking about, this was a couple of days ago, if I were to imagine, because we see these post-apocalyptic films like Terminator, where it's like dystopian and everything's, robots are coming to take us out. And I think since the beginning of technology, there's been this like slight apprehension, and for good reason, right? Because we don't know what we don't know, and if what we don't know knows us better than we know it, we're in for it. But I wondered if this idea of humanoid robots roaming the streets, shooting guns, was a little bit foolish, and maybe using artistic license to paint a picture of robots in our own image versus how it would in reality it would play out. And here's my thought. This is my theory. I don't know if it would play out this way, but correct me if I'm wrong, or I want to hear your 2 cents. So my 2 cents is this. I would see the takeover of the world by AI, for example, that some people are afraid of, happening more so in alignment with like what you said, where hackers basically breach, the government. And like I literally experienced this when I was in Virginia going through police academy, where we did not have gas to fill up our vehicles for at least a few days, maybe even a week. And I was fortunate. I drive a truck. I had a big tank. I didn't have any issues, but some people did. So much that our sergeant said, hey, if anybody has trouble getting rides, let me know. We'll figure something out. And I was like shocked because I was like, we're in America, which I always grew up being told this is the greatest country in the world, the number one. And I do believe that. I believe it was the greatest country in the world as far as, achievement and advancement and military strength, technology. But it was a real eye opener for me and a shock to see my own nation struggling to supply its people and its, businesses and military even, or law enforcement at least. I don't know what the military was facing, but with just fuel to get to work. And I was like, shoot, like if I were a robot, right? And I'm not capable, I'm not made for roaming the streets, walking like a human. Why am I going to shoot bullets at people to kill them? Plus, it's not in my interest because if you look at, I don't know if you've ever read The Art of War by Confucius. Not Confucius,
No.
not Confucius, I'm sorry, by Sun Tzu. Yeah, I messed it up. I try to sound smart by referencing something I don't even know. Because I didn't read the whole thing either. I just read the first few pages, honestly, the first chapter or so. But there was something interesting in it. It said, if you were to take over a enemy, there's 3 victories. It said the first victory, you kill everybody, you destroy the buildings, but you gain the land. Okay, that's like the low level victory. The second victory, you kill all the people, but the buildings are intact, right? And you have the land. And so it's basically saying, how can you invade or take over something as a nation without losing wealth, right? How can you maximize your gains, right? Profitability of war, right? The third one, he says there's the third victory. The third victory, you obtain the land, you obtain the houses, and you obtain the people, right? Because it's a workforce, human capital. Why would you want to lose human capital? If you can convince them to align with you and have them become subservient to you, even in a way where they're convinced that that's a good thing for them, now you've ultimately won the highest victory, according to Sun Tzu, ancient Chinese warrior philosopher. And I was like, wow, that's profound. And if I were a robot that was vastly more intelligent and perhaps even bordering on the edge of wisdom, right? I don't know where sometimes to draw the line between wisdom and intelligence in regards to these devices and how they're going to think, if they will think. But would it not be more effective for them to say, them being like robots, right? Or technology, whatever mind or minds we create as humans that could take us over, for them to say, well, we're going to make sure their water supply is shut down and their electricity is cut off. And basically with that, our supply chains are jacked. And we've lost our ability to survive in the wild as humans. We have evolved in a way to accommodate comfort above necessity a lot of the time, right? And that's kind of what we're based off of. That's what we've built our society around. So we're not very Spartan. We wouldn't last. I don't even think it would take robots to go through the streets with guns. I think that most of us, an obese populace, sedentary lifestyle, if not obese, at least you're like, you have some health allergy issues, like maybe me, it's like where you maybe your blood sugar drops, right? Because you haven't been living and active, and our DNA, more and more of us are living that have health issues. And naturally, if you were following the laws of evolution, the weak would die. So I would be dead already. And only like the elites would survive, right? Not to say that that's what should be, right? Just to say that that's what in the past kind of happened when we didn't have all this prosperity and ability to artificially enhance ourselves. So in such a world, I wonder if that's not how we would be taken over.
Yeah. No, I think you bring up really good points. And yeah, like recently there's been like a lot of talks of like, how this could potentially lead to the destruction of humanity.
Yeah.
Serious talks. And I think I don't know, I believe, sometimes unfortunately, that one of the biggest traits of human nature is self-interest.
Yeah.
Nearly every human has like this vast amount of self-interest. And the reason why I think this is important to this discussion is because I know that's a given. Like humans are self-interested. And I think that a lot of the technology that humans build have that in mind, i.e. it's not going to be destructive to the point of it destroys all of humankind. Now, I do think that bad actors, for example, could create like humanoid robots that go around and much like we have,
Well, they're already doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Like they have that now, but it's controlled by humans. But if you really wanted to do this at scale, where they're all self decision making, self-acting, where basically you can have more robots than humans, like doing you can imagine a world that might exist. So I do think there could be like scaling bad action, but I don't think, at least I would, I think human self-interest would make it, I think, where it's not that like it's a Pandora's box, that basically ruins everything. I think we need to incorporate things like, these like kill
Fail
switches.
safes and kill switches. Yeah.
Yeah, fail safes, and all these systems that, like, if, for example, something does escape the lab, that there's like multiple ways to stop it. Like, for example, if you're dealing with a really, really deadly biological weapon,
Yeah.
inside the lab, like
Yeah.
whatever it is, anthrax or whatever, you probably have a suit on, like a closed, hazmat suit, a closed environment, whatever. And I think similarly for the folks that are creating these sorts of things,
Yeah.
that could potentially, you need to have that sort of. But I don't think someone would like create something that kind of destroys everyone just
Yeah.
because, like, human self-interest is a given, robot self-interest is not a given. That is not a thing that is
At
a
least at
given,
this point.
At this point, yeah. And
Yeah.
I think it is a potential possibility in the future.
Right.
But I think because human self-interest unfortunately is so high, it's like, I would hope it's like squashes all these things and has the fail safes because they know it could create self-harm.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah. Also, on the line of self-interest, there's also the idea that, like every one of those guys who's in that hazmat suit has a little kid at home, or a wife, or a mother, somebody that they care about other than themselves. Right. And even if he was super depressed and wanted to kill himself, or even his whole family, there's others out there who are going to try to stop him, right? So this sort of this self-correcting effect of a plurality of individuals, right, working together, and with that comes some stability and checks and balances.
Yeah, I think that's what I look like. I think is the main thing that will prevent something like this happening. But I do think at a minimum we need fail safes, and there's been like a lot of call to action on like regulation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't think the regulators per se know like the depth of these things.
Sure.
Yet. Yeah. But I do think it should be like basically a group of people who do know the sophistication of this and like can make an agreement basically that then governs people who are building the technology universally, or at least where they have where they have their own, like they can't implement the law because universally is kind of tough to implement. But at least, like, for example, the people who are building the technologies in America can agree on something, and the folks in China can agree. So that way, like, there's fail safes wherever it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the likelihood of there being one evil genius out there, like that's possible, right? But that evil genius probably doesn't have the ability to take down everything by himself. There would have to be multiple evil geniuses. And at that point, because they're both evil and they're both geniuses, they don't want to work together. So even then, there's going to be some checks and balances, right?
Yeah, one would hope.
Yeah.
But I think, like I said, though, in the beginning, like every tool has positives and negatives. Yeah. And there's going to be a lot with AI. The more powerful the tool, the more like pronounced the positives, the more pronounced the negatives.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be very conscientious because, like I said, bad actors can now do things like even more at scale. And like, this week we heard about like government agencies in the US being hacked and stuff like that. And I don't know if it's AI related, but all I know is that, it's much easier to like with AI to be able to create like malicious acting. And then it's AI. And I think in our lifetimes too, it'll be quantum computing, which is like a whole nother
podcast episode.
Yeah. So,
wow.
But it's wild stuff.
Yeah, man, this is a weird time. This is a weird time in history.
Yeah, it is. And cool. I get excited. And sometimes I get impatient. Sometimes I want a lot of it to happen now.
Hurry up. Where's my mind chip, man? Where's my mind chip?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, what advice would you have to young people or others who are looking to kind of follow in some of your footsteps?
Yeah, I guess it depends, right? If you're looking for something like a Google in a traditional world, I think my advice would be very, very different than if you're looking to do something, entrepreneurially bent, like what I've done with Randy and Michael and Dragon Skin. I guess for a traditional, like, a traditional field, I'd say like, basically lean into what you're really good at, and kind of there are some things that you have to kind of check the box to do, which are like, you do have to usually unfortunately now go to like a 4 year or 2 year degree to just have like something to show that you have the capability of working with others and learning new topics and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think it's ultimately going to be like, I'd say at Google, I probably did 4% of what I learned in school. But I think it's looked at as like at least a minimum qualification. And then obviously, like, the more you can show kind of your skill sets in action through like internships or whatever the case is, obviously all that good stuff like serves you well. And be persistent, right? If there's something that sounds really cool
Yeah.
at the company that you think is a good fit, like, don't there will be a lot of no's. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, just being persistent and going for it can serve you well. So yeah, I think that's my advice for like a more traditional path. And then for like something like where you're kind of setting your own path, I like I said, I think my response is a lot more different. I think one of the things is, like, growing up, I didn't have as much exposure to failure as I did like in when I started getting into the corporate world and into Dragon Skin. And what I mean by that is, like, in the school structure, you can get a good grade.
Yeah.
There isn't many opportunities to fail, which is kind of limiting, because
Yeah.
if you don't, you will be like very averse to failing,
Right.
which I think is actually really important to things like starting your own company, because you cannot know just like from your own mindset what are the big problems and how customers will react to you solving them. You need to be, like I said, the biggest thing in my opinion that's important to creating something of value in terms of company is like understanding customers' problems and solving for it with outsized value. And I think that's going to take like a lot of failure. It's going to take a lot of like iteration and being able to persevere.
Mm.
And for something like starting your own company, I'd say like it could be really daunting. And sometimes it feels like you don't know how to do half the things you need to know how to do like to move forward. But I think being adaptable, being open to learn, being like resilient are like really important things. And
Yeah.
you don't need a degree, you don't need anything, but what you do need is like I think a mindset, and then an appetite to do like good in the world. And different people do have different motivations, like you said. Some people are financially motivated and stuff like that. But I think from my experience, at least, what keeps me, if money is what keeps you going, power to you. But what keeps me going is like, it has to be, I think for me, money is a part of it, but what's like doing good is like kind of what pushes me forward too. So like being attached to and like having value of the problem that you're solving for, I think is really important too. So
Yeah.
yeah, two different sides of a token on, I guess, what I would advise depending on what folks want to do. But yeah, I think it all starts with the question of like what, and then from there it becomes the how and what, and like why and stuff like that. So
That's cool. In the interest of time, I would like to summarize. I believe your purpose. Would you say it's this, that you desire to innovate in a way that will help others and add value to their lives?
Yeah, I think that you summarized it really well. I think my life's purpose, at least as I see it, is like basically doing as much good for as many people as possible through like scaled innovation. So I think,
That's
yeah,
cool.
you hit the nail on the head.
That's cool. That sounds like a tagline for your website too. Do you have a website yet? As much good for as many people as possible through innovation. Trademark. Boulos
There you go.
Haddad.
Some sort of Twitter like slogo, or logo, slogan rather.
Slogo. Hey, that's cool. You invented a new term too.
There you go.
Yeah, a
We
slogo.
start with small.
Well, I had one last question, the final question that I ask everybody.
Yeah.
And I know you believe in God, so I'm going to ask you, yeah, what role do you believe God played in your life?
Yeah. No, so I think for me, like, God has been like like everything, the whole my whole life is built on I think God's like mercy and like graciousness for me in ways. When we talk about things that I'm amazed by, like I mentioned, I'm really amazed by the human like like just how complex we are and things like that. And more so, I'm even more amazed by like, yeah, like God's just blessings that he's given me in my life, and like more than I deserve. Like there's so many times I felt in my life where whether it was getting into Google or the family that I have or the friends that I have, that I'm just like, you know, given so much more than I deserve. And I'm just yeah, I'm constantly humbled by that fact, that like you know, his graciousness in my life and in all the things I do. And yeah, I would hope that like I can only be like a small representation of his like kindness to the world and trying to do good, but yeah, like trying to be an actor of good through like the kindness that he's shown me. But yeah, like for me, it's like, yeah, I would be nothing, I feel like, without, you know, the like just God's graciousness in my life. So that's yeah, something I try to remind myself of often. But obviously it's easy to lose sight, but that is like I said, try to remind myself often of.
That's cool. And there's no perfect people out there, right? And people, I think, even the most devout Christian, or I've even met Muslims that are some good friends of mine, that they struggle keeping God at the forefront of their mind, you know. And for me, it's like I just have to. Well, being involved in a church helps, and you know, praying to Jesus, you know, every day. But there's days that we don't, right? There's days we forget to, or
Yeah.
or at least hours where it seems not to be at the forefront of our mind.
Yeah, for sure. No, I know that feeling.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's, I think, yeah, I think, yeah, it's a given that no one's perfect, which is why, um, you know, we try to make up for it as much as possible through, you know, like I said, just trying to kind of act in a positive way.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
That's cool, man. Well, what do they say? If at first you don't succeed, try again.
there you go.
And
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think you've embodied that statement in your, at least in your application and acceptance to Google, and that's really beautiful. Yeah.
For sure. No,
So,
thank you.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Boulos. This has been an awesome episode, and just great to get to know you more as a person. And I look forward to seeing where you go next.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, and thank you for the conversation. I'm so grateful that we got to do this. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
Same, of course. So yeah,
Cool.
guys, until next time, this was the OJ Podcast. Cool, man. That's perfect. That's a cut.
Hey, hey, cool.